Since the Emmy ballots were posted, you have been able to predict two additional categories in the competition field and reality field in the Gold Derby Prediction Center. We've got Outstanding Competition Program and also Best Host in a Reality Program available for your predictions. So I'm joined by Luca Giliberti, Kevin Jacobsen, and Sam Eckmann, and we're going to be sizing up these two categories and hopefully helping you make those predictions. So Sam, you apparently actually watch reality TV. So why don't you go ahead and size up the competition program category?
Well, this category is not one that's always known for surprises, I would say. They do tend to stick with the same batch, and every once in a while a new show gets in, but they tend to stick with what they like, where you've had The Amazing Race winning year after year after year. But the front runner this year will most likely be RuPaul's Drag Race. It has two consecutive wins under its belt, and it remains, a phenomenon right now, and it remains incredibly popular. And I think it, will be joined by several staples. Maybe there will be some surprises, but there's staples like The Voice, which has won before, Top Chef, American Ninja Warrior has done well before, which might join it. And I'm kind of looking, maybe I'm hoping too much, but I'm looking at, is there going to be a new show that joins the ranks? Is there going to be a surprise this year? And I have one in there I'm predicting Lego Masters right now to make the cut, which is a little bizarre, I know, because I don't have Nailed It in there, which also feels wrong, and I feel like Nailed It will get in because it is so fun and a guilty pleasure for so many people. But I'm going with a surprise, at least for now. I just have to believe that voters can surprise us and do something different with the category.
Yeah, I want to latch on to what you said about how maybe there will be a surprise, because this is, these are the Emmys that we're talking about. There are always surprises across the board, except in this category. Sometimes there are none. So maybe there will be a surprise, maybe not. This category, we just see the same shows nominated year after year after year. Even last year when we have like a genuine network TV hit in The Masked Singer, that couldn't get in. They just, defaulted to what they had nominated before. This year, The Amazing Race is sitting out. They're delaying their premiere, so they are actually ineligible for the first time in, 18 years or something? I think they've been nominated 17 times. So that means that we actually have an open slot for something else to come in. But actually, no, we don't, because then the Emmys went ahead and changed the rules. So now there are only 5 slots in this category instead of 6. So we could just have all of the nominees that are eligible returning from last year. But Sam, since you already mentioned it, why are you predicting Lego Masters?
Well, I'm kind of taking into account this year what COVID-19 and this pandemic is, what results and that's going to have on the nominees. How is that going to affect what shows up here? Because, the art and entertainment that we see and we choose to watch is, a result of what's going on in our life, I think. And Lego Masters, it did massive numbers for Fox. It was very successful. And it just radiates positivity. So I know it is a long shot because this category does not often offer surprises. But when you watch it, it is just, even though it is a competition show, and all the people are taking it very seriously and they all want that money and they're competitive, it does not have any ounce of meanness to it that many of the other series have. And I think that will be extremely appealing. So combining that, I think, after this pandemic, people just want that positivity that's very appealing to people. Lego is also one of the few IPs that really has cross-generational appeal. There are older Emmy voters who had played with Legos when they were a kid that can watch this with their adult children and their now grandchildren, and all get enjoyment out of it. And it again showcases, like you said, The Masked Singer couldn't get in. I think The Masked Singer couldn't get in because they do choose to highlight shows oftentimes that really display people's talent, whatever it's about, whether that's Project Runway or RuPaul's Drag Race, The Voice. It's people displaying their artistry, and Lego Masters does a great job of highlighting the contestants' creativity and artistry in the show, and that is, what you take away rather than some narrative about who's the villain of this season and who's coming after each other. So that's why I'm have that in there right now as what I hope could be a surprise, because it'd be nice to shake things up in the category.
Yes, it would. We are all predicting RuPaul's Drag Race, The Voice, and Top Chef, 3 past winners in this category. Luca, you are actually not predicting American Ninja Warrior.
Yeah,
and you do have nailed it, unlike Sam. So what's going on with your predictions?
well, actually, I should be predicting American Ninja Warrior, considering it's been nominated the last 4 years. And as we said, this category is pretty much same old, where they just nominate the same project over and over again. But its eligible season aired quite a long time ago. And I just feel like there might be other shows that could just be ahead of it this time around. If you look at our odds, it's not in the top 5 in our odds anymore either. I have nailed it in because it just broke through last year. And often when shows break through, it's easier for them to get nominated again than for them to break through in the first place. Its last season, or its eligible season, aired right after the stay-at-home order started being implemented. So I think that could help it as well. And then I predicted The Masked Singer last year, and so it might be stupid to predict it again, but we should probably mention that it did get 2 Guild nominations. It got a PGA nomination, and it got a Costume Design Guild nomination, I believe. So there is support for that show this time, or it seems like there's more support for that show this year. Am I confident in that prediction? No, because as Sam already mentioned, they just very often go for the same old. But that's where I currently stand. If this year is completely different, we don't know how people will respond or how people will vote now, considering they've been at home for so many months. Maybe they check out these new shows that they wouldn't have voted for in the past. We might not see these old favorites necessarily return if people have discovered other things in the meantime.
So Kevin, you're taking the boring approach of just going with the the most likely 5, which is not what our odds are doing. So explain yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I flirted back and forth with putting in things like The Masked Singer and even like making the cut as a potential 5th, but I kind of like what you were saying, Riley, earlier, is that I feel like in this category, and this more than any category, is where Emmy voters just are so reticent to pick anything new and just always vote for the exact same shows every year because they're not watching reality shows, really. And so I just feel like, RuPaul's Drag Race, The Voice, Top Chef are absolutely in, and I would be a complete shock if any of them missed. Nailed it. The fact that it got in last year over The Masked Singer, I think a lot of people were surprised that it did get in here last year, even over something like Project Runway, which did have a shift in hosting last year, but it had gotten like 14 nominations in a row in this category. And so the fact that it showed that level of strength, I think proves that it is probably here to stay, even if it's not going to be a long-term sort of show like Top Chef or The Voice or anything like that. And then for American Ninja Warrior, I don't really know why people are always kind of shaky about it possibly missing. I get that it's not in that top echelon of RuPaul and The Voice and Top Chef, those shows that get in every year, but it's gotten 4 nominations in a row, and it may be in that 4th to 6th range. But with The Amazing Race not being in here this year for the first time, considering just how unadventurous this category always is, I just don't feel confident in dropping any show that has been established. And I did a little bit of research beforehand, and thank you. I noticed that there has not been a single show in its first season reality show that has gotten in here since like the early 2000s. Like not even The Voice got in for its first year, which is why, when I was thinking about making the cut, possibly getting in because of the Heidi Klum and Tim Gunn effect and its own kind of level of popularity, I was like, well, we don't even know if people were watching it. It was also on streaming, so who knows what the viewership was. And, who knows about Lego Masters? I think it is a very positive show, like Sam was saying, and it's has that kind of brand name appeal, but it's about Legos. We know how the Oscars feel about Legos. So, you know,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just, I just have to go with what I know here. And it's just these 5. That's it.
You're telling me I'm wrong. Cool. I do want to mention about, it's interesting with making the cut because I don't see, a lot of people are predicting that on our site, but I have trouble predicting that because it sort of demands in a way that voters either choose making the cut or Project Runway, since that was what Heidi Klum and Tim Gunn created after they left. And I think it has divided people. I think, you know, making the cut didn't get as strong of reviews as they would have hoped, and some people preferred the format of Project Runway. So I think if it divides people and they're trying to pick one show over the other, then that's already voters are losing.
Yeah, I had no idea that it was dividing people. It's good to have somebody who watches reality TV and keeps up with it. But yeah, in this category, it is tricky, like Kevin was saying, about how first season shows don't break in. Like last year, we had Nailed It break in for its second season. And, you know, I'm a little hesitant about The Masked Singer because it only got 1 nomination last year for costumes.
Yeah.
But, you know, so did Nailed It. Got no other nominations other than that program nomination. So you don't really need to have broad support that is measurable to be breaking into this top category. Kevin, you mentioned that you're unsure about American Ninja Warrior, or more about why people are unsure about it. I would say that it's missed the Producers Guild Awards the last couple of years. The Producers Guild Awards, they have a competition category, and in general, they're just a great way to see what's kind of at the top of the Best Picture race, the Best Drama Series race, Best Comedy, all that kind of stuff. They usually have a slot or 2 missing that the Emmys might have, for example. So in this category, you know, they have 5 slots. The Emmys had 6 for years. And then usually the Producers Guild would throw in something else that's actually ineligible, like Lip Sync Battle. So American Ninja Warrior has missed the last couple of years there. So yeah, I'd say it's not in the top. But I also trust that group a bit less lately since they nominated America's Got Talent last year, and that didn't materialize, you know, at all at the Emmys. This year they did bring in The Masked Singer, so it seems to be on the rise a little bit. So maybe I'll throw it in. I was hoping to get some guidance from the Television Critics Association, but they didn't really nominate any of these players.
Or go ahead, whoever wanted to. I mean, what they did not. Or
okay. I'll go.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to talk about The Masked Singer here, first of all, because despite what I said about just shows that, you know, can't get in for their first season, I do think just the fact that it couldn't get in last year when it was so hot, when everyone was talking about it, and it had all that buzz, says something to me. And I don't know if it's going to be that kind of show that leaves some voters just feeling uncomfortable, like just in terms of you know, looking at all these other shows, that it does have that level of either inspiration or people really doing things, and I just can't, it just doesn't really jive with the general vibe of what the Emmys tend to like at this point, you know? So, yeah, I mean, you know what? I'm just going to go on another rant here. I mean, I remember in March, very specifically, there was a day in March where the coronavirus was starting to get serious and people were really starting to, you know, take it seriously. And then Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson were, the news broke that they had the virus. And that very same day, Sarah Palin was revealed as one of the people on The Masked Singer. And I just remember in that moment being like, this was the inflection point, you know? And I just wonder about whether, you know, a show like that is so frivolous ultimately can really resonate in this 2020 landscape. So anyway, that's my speech about The Masked Singer. I just really have no idea what to make of the show to begin with. I've watched it. It feels like a surreal universe, and I just don't know what to make of this show.
That's a very good point.
Mhm.
It's a very good point you make, especially if we have other contenders that have just been checked off so many times now, so many years. Maybe they just go with what they're familiar with and they don't go for something like The Masked Singer. And Riley, since you had mentioned the TCA nominations, the only one that did get one, I guess, is Making It, which I'm sure we'll talk about more when we talk about host. That's not something I necessarily see breaking into this category, but maybe it is something that we should keep an eye out for, considering, as I said, that we'll be talking about it in the host category. And sometimes shows just need a few years or a bit time to expand into other categories. So I'm definitely looking out for that one.
Well, they also nominated Top Chef.
Oh, right.
Okay, so let's move over to host. Host is a fun category, and then it used to be presented in the main telecast, and then one year they brought in the choreography nominees instead, and they never brought back host. They just got rid of them. So now they're presented at the Creative Arts, but we still like to talk about them. I guess another thing I observed was for years they had 6 nominees, so we actually thought that they had moved over to 6 nominees, but it turned out that there was just a tie for several years. So this year in the odds, we have RuPaul, Jane Lynch, Amy Poehler, and Nick Offerman for Making It, Nicole Byer for Nailed It, the Fab Five for Queer Eye, and Ellen DeGeneres for her Game of Games in the top 6. This year we will have 6 nominees in this category because of how many submissions there were. Kevin, let's go to you first. What do you think about this category? What's getting in? What's happening?
This category is always kind of up in the air, ironically, compared to competition series. I think RuPaul and Jane Lynch are probably as close as we can get to any sort of lock, just because they've won before. And yeah, I mean, there's no sense that any of that momentum is changing. And then I do think Amy Poehler and Nick Offerman probably will get in again, even though if I might be a little shaky on that just because we don't know if the show is resonating with them. But the fact that they got in last year in a field of 5 is a very, very good sign that they will stick around. And they're so well liked in the industry that, yeah. And then Nicole Byer, I think, is really on the rise as a comedic talent and is so integral to what makes Nailed It so fun to watch. And I just feel like you can't reward Nailed It without also rewarding Nicole Byer in this case. Obviously it didn't happen last year, but it feels like it's her time to finally get in. And then it's really, really tough because, last year, I don't know how many people were predicting like James Corden to get in for The World's Best, which is a show that nobody watched, but they just love him. And I feel like there's a lot of great names here that people like Jimmy Kimmel and Melissa McCarthy, people who are just hosting these shows that aren't really like competition shows, but just they are entertainers and hosts. That who knows what that last slot could be. But did I mention Heidi Klum and Tim Gunn? I don't think I did, but yeah, so I do think their history with the Emmys will possibly help them get in here. Again, we have no idea how many people are watching Making the Cut, but I could just see even people name checking the two of them because they love them. I'm personally going with Jimmy Kimmel as just kind of the last random slot for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Obviously, the executive board of the Emmys loves Jimmy because he keeps hosting every year, and every time it goes back to ABC, that is. And that has also extended to him getting into Variety Talk series every year. And, I think Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was a show that happened in the virus
what year is
era. Yeah.
Okay. I feel like time's kind of up for Jimmy Kimmel and Ellen DeGeneres. I feel like people are not so hot on that.
Oh, wow.
I don't know about Ellen, though, because I know she's had controversy this year, but I think when people think of this host category, when voters think of this host category, they just go, Kevin, as you said, for an entertainer. Like they go for who entertains them most. And I think
Yeah.
that her show is just built around, fun. The one I'm worried about is the Fab Five from Queer Eye,
Oh yeah.
because everyone expected them to get in last year, and I would argue they had,
And the year before, I think.
yeah, and I would argue in those years they had even more of a cultural impact than they had this year. And I do have to wonder if voters are wary of giving a nominee slot to 5 people at once.
5 people.
We've had duos before with Tim Gunn and Heidi Klum have won, and Amy Poehler, Nick Offerman, and Top Chef got in once as well. But it's rare that you get those duos, and there's never been more than 2. So I wonder if that's what's holding them back from, because Queer Eye is certainly one of the most popular series on the board here. But I do have them in right now. I don't have where I have a daring pick for competition series, but here I'm playing it pretty safe because the top 6 just look right to me. Queer Eye is questionable. Amy Poehler and Nick Offerman might be questionable since their show isn't really playing in many other categories, but I think those 2 are incredibly well liked.
Yeah, I mean, there's not, or did you want to go ahead, Riley?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I feel like I wouldn't even be surprised if I saw like Tan France nominated for his other show.
Right. I mean, I think this category, as Sam already said, I'm also just sticking with the safe or the top in our odds because it's just so difficult to see someone else breaking. And I think what Kevin, the argument he made is very compelling, that they might just go for someone like Jimmy Kimmel, someone who entertains, someone who they know. Because even, I mean, we mentioned Jane Lynch, but if I'm not wrong, she missed last year, for example. So it's not like she's never missed before. But again, there's no way I would omit her this year in my predictions because I wouldn't know who to replace her with. I still think people very much like Ellen DeGeneres. I also still think they like Jimmy Kimmel, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him sneak in. I think Nicole Byer will benefit from the fact that shows typically expand in their second seasons in terms of nominations. Nailed It got in last year. I think it'll get more nominations this year, and she is so integral to the show. She was nominated at our own Gold Derby Awards last year. Not that those matter, but it's something worth pointing out. So I'm also just sticking with the top 5, 6 in our odds. Predicting the Queer Eye hosts is always risky because, as we've mentioned, they just haven't been nominated before. And Sam, you might be right. It might be because there are 5 people, and that might be their main problem. So realistically, we probably shouldn't be predicting them this year, but I'm not bold enough to put anyone else in at the moment.
Kevin, I feel like I cut you off earlier.
About what? Jimmy Kimmel?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just, I felt like, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire just was a show that happened to be airing at the right time and had a bunch of the celebrity guests on. And I don't know, it seemed like a show that people were watching and liking at the time. And, so I don't really feel very strongly about it. But like I said, he just seems like someone who has been in the club for a while with the Emmys. Not only with the board who keeps hiring him as a host, but also just the voters who keep voting for his show. So, I mean, I don't know. This is always a crapshoot for me.
Yeah, it's tricky too because this is not like, costume design where it's costume designers voting on it or writing where it's writers voting for it. There's no host branch of the Emmys. So what the Emmys do is they say, okay, everybody who doesn't have a dedicated category, you get to vote for host. So it's just this hodgepodge. We've got, casting directors, the daytime programming branch, the producers branch, the production executives branch, the professional representatives, the reality branch, of course, and the television executives branch. Those are all the branches that are voting on the host category, which is different from the competition program category where it's just everybody. So I think that accounts for some of the discrepancies. Although that is like a pretty wide range, you'd think that it would be broad enough to get more consistency. I'm going with Melissa McCarthy because I think that she's very well liked, like James Corden last year. And then I have the Fab Five because come on, they've got to get in eventually. Hopefully this year, now that there are 6 slots again. Then I have Nicole Byer for Nailed It, but I don't know.
Well, to your point, Riley, the fact that there's so many people voting here and there's no real, it's trickier, I think, to find like criteria for a host. They're really kind of voting on their personality. It's kind of who do you like most, who entertains you. And I think that's why you see the names that you do. And maybe that's why Nicole Byer, didn't make it in despite her being really the reason to watch Nailed It, is that she wasn't as well known of a quantity for the first season of Nailed It. Whereas now she's kind of, her recognition has grown quite a bit, so she might have more of a chance this year. And I just think that's why people like RuPaul walk away with this category, because they're such large personalities. It also helps Drag Race for this host and the competition series that they have all-stars airing right now during the voting period, so voters are reminded of it if they're watching that spin-off series as well. But yeah, I think there's been an interesting turn in this category, whereas before reality competition hosts played a much bigger role, but now there's a lot more people who are doing game shows like Jane Lynch or Degeneres. Like Jeff Probst is someone who I'd love to see rejoin the category. I know he's not hurting, he's won 4 of these before, he was the first person to win the category, but like I find him to be an engaging host and producer on Survivor because he's very always in the moment in what he can do on that show. He's just very comfortable in that game. He knows how to make decisions and interact and guide conversations in the moment. And that's impressive to me, but it seems they have taken this turn towards going to who's the big, bold, entertaining personality. And that's why these, huge famous megastars show up here.
Yeah, we also have Alec Baldwin and Steve Harvey. They were nominated just a few years ago. We also have Howie Mandel for Deal or No Deal. He was nominated the very first year of this category, hasn't been seen since. Who has any final thoughts on the host category?
Well, just to add on to the Jeff Probst discussion, the only reason I think he could have a very, very tiny, slightly better chance this year is because Survivor just had its 40th season and they did a big Winners at War season and he was doing a lot of publicity for that. And I feel like there was just a lot more attention on Survivor this year than in past years. And they also had to deal with kind of a Me Too scandal in the same season cycle. So there was a lot going on with Survivor this past year, but again, I do think they're just so far beyond that show at this point that it's really not even that likely, but just I think has slightly more of a chance this year.
Yeah, it did feel like there was more buzz around it. I would have thought that we might have seen that manifest in the TCA nominations.
Exactly, which is why it probably won't manifest much of anything at the Emmys, sadly.
It's hard when there's so many shiny new shows. There's just so much television content being produced. I think newer material just resonates a little bit more than something that's been around as long as Survivor has. It was like the original reality competition show.
All right. Well, I hope that we have been a help